Josh and I are torn over Asus's newest Zenbook A14. We both agree that at $1,100, this laptop is overpriced with what is meant to be a budget processor, the Snapdragon X. This processor also limits you to the ARM version of Windows. Where we disagree is whether it's worth buying if it goes on sale. I feel that its great battery life and its featherweight chassis are big wins in a 14-inch form factor. Josh finds it looks and feels cheap, and even on sale, he would prefer to sacrifice those wins for a more premium-feeling laptop. So, while this MacBook Air wannabe certainly has some high points for the right person, there's still a lot of negative to cover. Firstly, on the positives, this laptop is so light and airy. It weighs 2.15 pounds, which is exactly how much our ThinkPad X1 Carbon weighs, but that laptop costs twice as much. The way Asus has accomplished this lightweight chassis is by making it completely out of a magnesium alloy with a ceramic texture they call ceraluminum. This is a result of the same manufacturing process they used on the lids from the Zenbook S line, but those are made of aluminum with a more premium look and feel. The A14 we have in is a light gray color they are calling Iceland Gray, but you can also get it in Zabriskie Beige. This beige is all over their marketing for this thing, and it's hilariously drab. Weird advertising decisions aside, this chassis design is also meant to be very durable, and it truly feels like it, unlike some other similarly lightweight laptops like the LG Gram. It's scratch and smudge resistant, and I honestly feel that it looks quite nice, but as I said, Josh does not agree. I will give him the fact that you can definitely get more stylish laptops in this price range. However, both of us agree that the main downside with this chassis is that once you get your hands on it, it does feel cheap due to the material they've used. It even has a little deck and screen flex. Its hinges are also weak. When I was walking around with it, the screen would flop backwards sometimes. This will matter if you plan on using your laptop on a bumpy plane or train. The X1 Carbon feels noticeably better built, and as I said, it weighs the same amount. The display is not very exciting. It is a 14-inch OLED panel with a wide color gamut, but it only has a resolution of 1920 by 1200, and its refresh rate is capped at 60 Hz. So, content on screen won't look as crisp, and movement won't look as smooth as on laptops with higher resolutions and refresh rates. It hits over 420 nits of brightness, which sounds decent, but it does have a glossy finish, which is a bit more reflective than I'd like. You may notice reflections in brighter areas like a coffee shop or next to a window, and its brightness is not enough to combat these. I found it enjoyable enough to look at and use in our reasonably lit office, but we tend to keep the blinds closed. Next is the keyboard, which is another place Josh and I disagree. I found its nice soft key texture enjoyable to type on, while he found it slippery. We both noticed that it picks up oils pretty quickly, though. It has a standard layout, which means no mispresses, and the 3-stage backlight was nice and bright. I'd say the biggest con of the keyboard is its 1.3mm key travel, which had me feeling like I was hitting the bottom of the keyboard deck. I would have appreciated a bit more room. Then we have the Trackpad, which isn't very noteworthy. It's pretty accurate and has a relatively quiet click, but it's still mechanical. Its texture is very smooth. Some may find it too smooth, almost slippery. It also picks up oils worse than the keyboard, which adds to this laptop's cheap look. I wouldn't mind this trackpad so much if the laptop was a bit less expensive, but considering it's starting in a price bracket against similar laptops with haptic ones, like the MacBook Air and Surface Laptop 7, I would have liked to see one here. Ports are pretty standard. On the left, we have an HDMI 2.1 port, two 40GB USB-C 4.0 ports, and a headphone mic combo jack. On the right, we have one 10GB USB-A port. I was the most surprised by it having the HDMI, as it is a nice addition at this size. I was disappointed to see both charging-capable ports on the left side, as that means that cables might get in your way if your plug is on the right. The speakers are pretty poor. They get nice and loud for such a small device, but they are downward-facing and have a bit of a muted, lifeless sound to them. They are also a little less clear than I'd hoped. It sounds as if there is a veil over them compared to the MacBooks. We don't think you're likely to notice this if this is your only laptop, but here's how they sound. Here's Josh to show you how the webcam looks and sounds.
The webcam looks fine. As you can see, colors look pretty decent. I have to say I'm quite happy with this one.
Now, with these kinds of laptops, we know a lot of you won't be doing anything too intensive on them, but we still like to go over how they perform just in case. This laptop is powered by the Snapdragon X 26100, which is a new processor Qualcomm has released that is a cut-down version of their X Plus 42100. That one's not a great performer in single-core or graphics, so we were pretty concerned about how this new one would perform before we got it in. In these graphs, you will see it pitted against laptops that either match it in weight or price to provide the fairest comparisons. In our Geekbench benchmark, which tests a variety of common performance tasks, It does pretty poorly against its competition. It's the worst in single-core, and in multi-core, it only beats out the very poor-performing HP Pavilion Aero 13 with a 2-year-old Ryzen 5 processor. In Cinebench, which tests the processor when it's maxed out, it does a bit better, still very poor in single-core, but we see it do better in multi-core than the Intel Lunar Lake chip in our comparable Zenbook S14 and the MacBook Air with M3. We think once the Airs with M4 come out, this may be a different story, though. In the grand scheme of things, this is likely good enough for the type of user it's intended for. I did our graphs on Office for a few different videos and never had any slowdowns or lagging issues. It's good to keep in mind that there can potentially be big benefits of a lower performing processor, because laptops with them can have less heat, fan noise, and better battery life. Given this is a new processor, we were very excited to see how it did in terms of power efficiency, the key driver to those benefits I just mentioned. We do this by having the laptop complete intense CPU tasks, running Cinebench for 10 minutes, and measuring its power draw, heat, and fan noise. When it comes to power draw, unfortunately, Qualcomm still doesn't support third-party tools reporting on how much wattage these chips draw. To give us a general idea, we instead measure power draw from the wall and subtract 12 watts to account for the screen, fans, and other laptop components that are pulling wattage. This is not an exact science, unfortunately, but these are the numbers we see on comparable laptops. Based on these numbers, the Snapdragon X chip draws around 31 watts to get a Cinebench score of 695. We plot this performance result as well as its results in its balanced and eco modes on a scatter plot to show how it stacks up against similar processors. We want dots to be as high up as possible, indicating good performance, and as far left as possible, indicating lower power draw. When we do this, the chip appears to be about as efficient as the Snapdragon X Plus 42100, which makes sense as they are basically the same processor. This new chip also beats out the Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake chips by Intel, which you can see here in the blue. Don't worry, the names get more confusing. AMD's Zen 5 365 chip in the red and the X Elite 78100 in orange seem to be beating the X in second place here, with Apple taking the efficiency crown as always. To get a similar score as the 26100 at 25 watts in its balance mode, the M3 chip in the MacBook Air only has to pull 11 watts. This really emphasizes that these Snapdragon chips are likely not as efficient as they are advertised. Even if our wattage numbers were off by 10 or more, Apple would still be winning here. One reason efficiency is so important is that it leads to a more enjoyable laptop experience, less heat, less fan noise, and longer battery life. When we look at that same 10-minute Cinebench run in its highest performance mode, the keyboard deck stays cool, but it gets warm on the underside. It stacks up to be around the same or better than most of its competitors. When it comes to fan noise, however, it is a clear loss for the A14 at 53 decibels. This is probably how it's avoiding getting too hot. This, again, is indicative of a worst-case scenario if you're doing intense tasks on this laptop. For my light use of Office and web browsing, where I was running it on its default balance mode, I never heard the fans going, and it stayed cool 100% of the time. For battery life, it does pretty well. Firstly, it retains full performance when unplugged, which is good. When doing a 30-minute performance task on battery, we see it only loses 25%. This is pretty comparable to the Lunar Lake Zenbook and the VivoBook with the 42100 chip. Apple's better efficiency during performance tasks is really clear in this graph. It also does more with its smaller battery. When it comes to lighter tasks, like streaming a movie over Wi-Fi for 4 hours, the A14 still keeps about 3/4 of its battery life, which is good, but not as high as we expected. We are comparing it to some of the least power-hungry laptops on our list here, and it certainly keeps up. Lastly, for battery tests, we like to look at how long it takes to drain the battery fully when playing a video back offline at 200 nits, which is an extremely optimized use case. This test, as expected, gives us the most favorable results for the A14. It lasts nearly 20 hours, beating out its competing Lunar Lake Zenbook with a larger battery. The MacBook Air doesn't do as well here, likely due to its smaller battery. But this is still good information for you to have if you plan to travel a lot with your laptop. This 20 hours number is also good information for you to have considering all the advertising from Asus says up to 32 hours for a similar video playback rundown. We have never seen a laptop last that long, and I doubt we'll see it anytime soon. Our best performers only get about 15 to 20 minutes longer than this one, so I'd still call it a win for the A14, just not nearly as much as they're claiming. Now, something that isn't a win for the Zenbook A14 is its integrated graphics performance. It's terrible. In Wildlife Extreme, which is cross-platform and therefore available on macOS, we see it do about half as well as modern processors. You can tell that Qualcomm cut the graphics power in half when they moved over from the X185 on the X Elite chips to the X145 on the X and X Plus. Apple does the best here with Lunar Lake close behind. The only chip doing about as poorly is the AMD Zen 4 in the Aero 13, which, as we've said, is a much older processor, and it still beats the X26100 CPU. Now, I'll let Josh close us out.
Alright, this Zenbook A14 is the first laptop that we've tested with Qualcomm's new low-end 26100 chip. You are getting better multi-core performance than laptops with Intel's Lunar Lake, but you are getting poorer single-core performance, woeful integrated graphics, and you are running the risk that some applications may not work on Qualcomm's hardware. At the A14's MSRP of $1,100, you can buy many better laptops. This one really needs to be cheaper to be viable, especially considering it feels like a budget laptop. Now, if it goes on sale at around $800 to $900, we do think it's a decent choice for light users who are sticking to web browsing and office applications. Its pros are its big screen, it's lightweight, and its long battery life. But you can buy many more premium feeling laptops at this price, which do have better displays, more comfortable keyboards, and better trackpads. The Surface Laptop 7, for example, is a good one. I would personally buy that laptop. You could also consider the MacBook Air, which performs around the same as the A14 and also has good battery life. If you want more performance, the HP OmniBook Ultra 14 has a much more powerful AMD Zen 5 processor and again can be found around this price point. This all being said, I certainly understand that for some folks like Sierra, they may opt for the A14 for the positives that we've talked about. That's if it's on sale, of course. If you're looking for some recommendations and alternatives, check out our website at justjosh.tech. You can find all the laptops that we recommend for various types of users, as well as where to go to get the best deals on them. We even have a helpful price tracker so that you can wait for the best time to buy. It's quickly becoming a hub for laptop buying, so go check it out. If you want to support us, you can click the like button, get subscribed, or of course, if you want to do a little more, you can become a Patreon supporter or YouTube member, links down below. Till next time, go do something awesome with your day, and we will catch you later.